Okay. All right, so we're recording. If you have any questions, again, feel free to speak up, but just keep in mind that we're gonna share this later on the TC Next portal, so it will be available. All right, so let's get right to it. So this session is called Confessions of a Recruiter, Top Tips for Landing Your Next Job. And we will get right into it. All right, so first of all, nice to meet you. I will give a little bit of an introduction about who I am. Then I'm going to share facts about recruiting. So some key facts or some key statistics that I think are helpful to know as a job seeker. Then the bulk of the session is going to be talking about myths and realities. So something that I feel pretty passionately about as someone who's worked in recruiting for over a decade is there are a lot of myths out there, a lot of things that frustrate people about the job search. Some of them are true, and we'll talk about those, but some of them are false, and I can help you kind of understand what you should focus on in your job search. Then finally, I'm going to share tips for applying for jobs online. And I'll talk through, you know, what that looks like, how to spend your time doing that so that you get the best result possible, which is your next job. So let's get right into it. First, let's just do some sharing. What do you think about job applications? I want to hear from you guys. You know, when you think about applying for jobs, what do you think about the process? And you can share that in the chat. You know, is it something you enjoy doing, something you're good at, something you find frustrating, something that's confusing to you? Okay, someone said stressful. Yep, that's a common word that comes up. What else do I hear out there? Tedious, requires patience, redundant. Yeah, Brianna, that's a good one. The feeling of, and if I'm not expressing what you mean by redundant, let me know, but the feeling that you're doing the same thing over and over again. So a lot of times, like in online applications, you're asked to share, you know, what's your name, what's your college, enter all this data 100 times for 100 different applications. It's very tedious. Okay. Anna Maria, you said clicking apply is a black hole. Such a common feeling. And unfortunately, you know, there's a reason for that on the company side. So yeah, that's a common feeling. Repetitive and inefficient, absolutely difficult, stressful, uncertain. Guys, I feel you on all of these things. And this is exactly why I'm doing this session. I can't promise that this session will make you not feel those things, but I will give you some tips on how to feel less that way and explain some of the reasoning behind why it feels this way. So sorry to start out on a negative note, everyone, but we'll get into the positive vibes in just a second. All right. So let's get into the content. So I'm Missy Lafferty. I am one of the career advisors here at Columbia Business School, at Teachers College. I have an MBA from Columbia Business School, so I'm an alum of Columbia as well. I am here as a career advisor at Teachers College, so I do these workshops and programming. I'm also available for one-on-one advising appointments if you want to book time with me. I'm happy to do that. I have a background in recruiting and hiring, and I like to say that I've touched recruiting as a profession throughout my entire professional career, although I haven't necessarily worked as a recruiter for all that time. So most recently, I worked as a marketing director for an HR technology company. It's a company that builds the software that companies use for job applications. So I'm used to like talking about how companies should be using this stuff. I've also worked as a recruiting executive at a large technology firm. I worked as a recruiter for 5 years in luxury retail, which was a pretty cool gig. Plus, I just find people's career paths entirely fascinating, and this is my favorite kind of topic. So I'm living my passion here, working as a career advisor at Teachers College. So what I want to share first of all are some data points about applying for jobs, and the reason that I like to share this is I think that as Anna Maria said, clicking apply, and I would say the application process as a whole can sometimes feel like a black hole. And that is entirely correct in some ways, and data supports that. So Recruiters take about 6 seconds to scan a resume, meaning, you put all this work into your resume. I meet with people one-on-one to make these beautiful, bullet points and make sure their formatting is right. But in reality, when you submit your application, when a human being, typically a recruiter, looks at it, they're scanning it in about 6 seconds. I've heard 6 to 10 as well. On one hand, this is insane. It's like, how do they capture anything when looking at it that fast? On the other hand, recruiters look at a ton of resumes every day. So there are key things that they're looking for. So I share this fact, one, just to set the foundation of what the process looks like, but also knowing how quickly they look at it can also help you think about what are the things you need them to see. So, one of the pieces of advice I give people when I'm looking at their resume is use a very standard, frankly, boring format. And the reason I say that is because recruiters are scanning things so quickly. They have key elements that they want to look for. And if your format looks different than everyone else's, it's going to be a lot harder for them to see. Second data point. On average, job postings receive about 118 applications for one position. And I've also read that for corporate jobs, so, if you're applying for marketing, for human resources, any kinds of corporate jobs at a company, those jobs actually get even more applicants per position, about 250. Pretty frustrating to hear that, especially if you're in the thick of submitting job applications. But I share this number because, if you are thinking about applying for a job and your job search strategy is sitting at your computer, submitting applications, just looking at these stats, you could assume you'd have to submit about 120 applications to finally be that one applicant selected. It's not exactly how it works out in the numbers, but the point here is that, just submitting job applications as your only job search strategy is going to take a very, very long time and will feel like a black hole. So we'll talk about how you can, what other elements of the job search that you can lean on to land your next job. This is just a visual of the data point I just shared. So corporate jobs, they attract 250 resumes, as you can see on the left. Out of those, only about 4 to 6 will be interviewed and only 1 will get a job offer. So pretty grim. All right, now we're going to play a little game. So this is going to be a true or false game, and you can participate in the chat. You can just say, T or F, or you can write true or false. You can also just think it in your head. That's fine too. So I'm going to put up a statement, and then I want to hear if you think it's true or false. And there are some trick questions. All right. So the first one is, job application software may read my resume and auto reject me. True or false? So, if you're not familiar with this idea of auto rejection, the idea out there is there are companies that use tools that do an initial scan of applicants and then put some applicants forward and reject some applicants based on just scanning the resume. True or false? True, 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 true. Okay, seeing a lot of trues. Any dissenters? Oh, all right, everyone's in the true bucket. Let's see. It depends. This is my trick question. Sorry, I started with a trick. They're not all like this. So the reason that I say it depends, there's a couple elements here. Companies are increasingly using technology that sorts out or prioritizes applications based on keywords, based on how you answer questions and the information that you provide in your job application. So there is this technology element laying over top of a lot of the job application. I say that it depends because in my experience, many companies are not rejecting people based on their resume. A lot of the technology that reads resumes is frankly not good enough to prevent, people getting rejected who would actually be a great candidate or have, things that would be good in the role. So companies are in many cases not willing to take the risk to reject people outright by a machine. More likely what's happening is if you've ever filled out a job application, there are often questions that are asked, like, do you have 3 years of experience doing this? Do you have certification in this? Are you eligible to work in this country? Those are sometimes used for auto rejection, and they're called qualifying questions. That is one way that you can get sorted into a bucket or prioritized. But the resume itself, I would say, you don't need to be too concerned that your resume is going to get you auto rejected from a job. There's a lot of articles out there. There was an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal a couple months ago that was saying, you know, this technology is like significantly changing the landscape for hiring. And it is, but I think it's more the potential of it. And, you know, in general, companies are still a little hesitant to use this. The takeaway as an applicant is that when you're writing your resume, you know, you may be applying to companies that are using technology like this. So what you want to do is make sure that, one, your resume is very easy to read, whether it's by a person or a machine. That means having, you know, standard fonts like Times New Roman or Arial, you know, not doing like any kind of, you know, crazy formatting, like with images. I always recommend submitting your resume as a PDF. You know, if the application site says submitted as a doc or a PDF, you can use doc as well. That's fine. Just making sure that things are pretty standard so that if it is submitted to, you know, like an application, like a piece of software, it's easy to digest. The other takeaway here is that keywords are really important. So in systems where, you know, there is some element of judgment that being done by software, what the software is often looking for is keywords. So the way that I recommend people do this is look at job descriptions, you know, that you're applying to. So you don't need to make a custom resume for every job, but the types of jobs that you're applying for, you'll see the same keywords come up over and over again. You know, for instance, if you're looking for, I'm just giving a random job, but if you're looking for like a project manager job, you'll look for things, you'll see things in the job description like, you know, organization, you know, cross-functional communication, deadlines, managing a timeline, all those kinds of things that come up over and over. You'll want to make sure that those keywords are in your resume as well, because in many cases, the software that's reading resumes is as simple as looking for keywords. I'm going to share in the chat now 2 tools that you can use online to help you do this. And if you've worked with me before, these will probably be familiar to you. But one way to come up with keywords that you should put in your resume is to use this site called tagcrowd.com. So what you do is find, you know, the job descriptions that interest you, maybe 3 to 5. You can do a lot more if you want. You put them into TagCrowd, or you put the links to them into TagCrowd, and it'll come up with a word cloud that shows, you know, the biggest words as the ones that show up most frequently. You'll want to make sure that those words are also showing up in your resume. So that's a great tool for this. The second thing that I would recommend to think about how your resume is viewed if you're submitting it to one of these companies that uses this software is called JobScan. And this is actually, it basically is acting like one of these tools. And you submit your resume, and then it says, you know, what percentage match you would be for certain jobs, or, you know, what elements of your resume you can strengthen to make it more digestible by these pieces of software. JobScan, there's a free version and a paid version. I would say just try out the free version and see how you like it. I have used JobScan, the paid version, in the past. It's just more powerful, but you by no means have to use the paid version. Okay, let me just go through the chat to answer a couple questions before I go on to the next true false statement. So I have a question from Kristen. Thank you. Are 2-column resumes better than single row resumes? And what I think you mean by this is, like, on the page you have, you know, 2 columns of information. I've seen people split up, like they'll have their education on one side and their experience, or another way that people do this sometimes is they'll put their dates on one side and then corresponding with the experience on the other. I actually think keep it simple and have a single row resume. My preferred resume style, I've actually created one for Teachers College. It's listed on the TC Next website under resources. There's actually a whole Google Drive full of sample resumes and templates and stuff for you. So I'll share that here. tc.columbia.edu/tcnext. So that's the TC Next website. If you go there and click on resources, you'll find under resumes a template. And if you see it and think, wow, that looks really boring, you're right, it is. And it's intentionally so. I made it. So I'm happy to work with any one of you individually to adjust your resume to that standard format. All right, let's keep going. Keep the questions coming for sure. But now let me know true or false. If you put $1 in the salary requirement box, you will be rejected. So, if you're not familiar with this on job applications, a common question is when you're applying for a job, one of the data entry points that you'll have to answer, or in many cases have to answer, is salary requirements. They'll say, what are your salary requirements? What are your salary expectations? And then you enter a number and people are like, oh my God, what do I say? Like, I don't even know about this company or this job. So the question here is, if you put $1 in the salary requirement, you will be rejected. False, false, false. Oh, man, you guys are good. Yes, you're right. Okay, so maybe I have to take this out as a myth because it seems like you guys are onto it. So this salary requirement question, basically, there's like a couple ways to think about it. Companies put it in because it's helpful to get a gauge on, what people are expecting in the market. It also is a way to see if someone puts in something really, really high, like, okay, they may be thinking this is a different job than it is. But as a job seeker, you just don't have that much information about the job when you first apply for it. So my advice generally is just don't enter anything if it's not required, or just, if you're forced to put a number, you can just put like $1. Companies in general don't really use this because the data that they get from job applicants is all over the place. And frankly, there's not a good argument as a job seeker to put anything in here, because if you, put a low number in, arguably they could offer you less than they were planning to. If you put a high number in, they could, take you out of the running because they think the job is different than what you envision. So, so I would say, in that salary requirement box, just leave it blank, or just put like $1 or something. Some recruiters may not like to hear that advice because they want to collect the information, but it's better to have as a conversation when both parties know a little bit about each other. Okay, so questions coming in on this. Sometimes it asks for a certain minimum number of numbers. How do we ask without pigeonholing ourselves? Ooh, okay, so VJ, let me ask a follow-up question to that. Do you mean like it'll say, oh, you need to put 5 numbers in here? So you'd have, okay, yeah. Oh, okay, they're getting sneaky. For that, I would still just put something that like isn't necessarily reflective of reality. Like you could put 10,000 or something. I just think it's a pretty poor way to collect information. So I would say try to sneak around it, or like give them something that just prompts further discussion rather than gives them information that they could use to take you out, because you just don't know that much about the job at this point, early on, to estimate your salary. Another question, can we ask about salary on the first interview? Okay, this is a great question. Standard advice on this is, don't bring up salary right away. Like, let them ask first. My advice about this is to first of all, have some idea for yourself what your salary requirements are. Even if you're not necessarily sharing it in that box when they ask, you do want to have some expectation of a range. The reason I say that is because in your first interview, if you get the sense that the job may not be paying enough, it can save you time by having that conversation early. If you're interviewing for a job and you're like, this doesn't seem quite as senior as I had expected, it can definitely be worth your time to say, can we just talk about salary really quickly? Because I want to make sure that, you can afford me. And it's fine to have that conversation early on. I would not ask about salary requirements unless you're prepared to talk about it yourself. So don't go into a job saying, how much does this job pay? And not being able to answer, well, how much, what are you looking for? Be prepared to answer with a range in that case. So I'm removing the taboo from talking about salary. You can. Any other questions about salary requirements when you're applying for jobs or when you're in conversations with employers? Okay, we can keep moving on, and if these questions keep coming up, that's totally fine. All right, next one. Nobody reads cover letters, true or false? Nobody reads them. False, false, true, true, false, true, false, true. Ooh. My favorite topics are when people are split. Okay. False. So I guess the wording is, this is a little confusing. So the statement is nobody reads cover letters. That is false. People do in fact read cover letters. That doesn't mean that everyone does. And the way that I give advice about cover letters is that many recruiters do not read cover letters. I don't have an estimate on this, but I would say probably in most cases, your cover letter will not be read. However, when it is read, it can be really, really influential. Meaning, you know, a recruiter gets your resume. They think this person could be a good fit. I'm not quite sure. I'm deciding who to bring in for interviews. Let me look at their cover letter. Then they'll make a decision. So in that case, it's incredibly influential. So Kristen, thank you so much. This is exactly my impression. Kristen says, my recruiter tells me he doesn't read cover letters, but my manager says she does read cover letters. So this is like the challenge with cover letters. Like the advice is, oh, they don't matter. No one reads them. And then it's like, well, when they do it, it matters a lot. So my advice for cover letters reflects this. One, VJ, great question. What should we put in cover letters to make them stand out? My advice for cover letters is because they often are not read, you don't want to spend a lot of time customizing everyone. But because they can be incredibly influential in some cases, you want to make sure that your cover letter is outstanding. How do you do that? How do you make that happen? My advice is to have a cover letter. I would say a cover letter tool that you create for yourself. So it's not the advice of have a general cover letter that you submit every time. I, in fact, hate when people will write like a cover letter and then they just replace the title and the job, because those cover letters read as very generic. You know, in that situation where someone is looking at your cover letter because they like your resume, but they're not sure to bring you in. And then your cover letter is like, I think I am an outstanding candidate because I have great communication skills. They're like, okay, you clearly submitted this for everyone. So my advice is have a cover letter tool that you create. And what I mean by that is the first paragraph and the last paragraph are going to be the same in pretty much every cover letter, except for title and company. So your first paragraph is like, you know, I'm applying for this job at this company. I found the job at this website. I would make a great candidate, whatever, fine. The bottom paragraph is going to be, you know, thank you so much for your consideration. I look forward to hearing from you. Fine. But those middle paragraphs, generally there's like 2 to 3 paragraphs in the middle in a cover letter, are going to be customized for the role. But you don't have to write a brand new cover letter every time. What I suggest doing when you're starting your job search, that list of job descriptions that you found that I mentioned earlier, like that you use to look up keywords, read those job descriptions that are reflective of what you're applying for. And again, think of the keywords that they're looking for. Think of the key things that these jobs want. Maybe there'll be, you know, 5 to 7 things that come up over and over again. Write a paragraph for each of those things. So you're going to end up writing like 5 paragraphs. You know, one might be like, again, in that project manager example that I gave, one might be about your outstanding communication skills, saying, you know, that you're great at communication. Here's one story about when you were really good at it. You know, a job that you had to do it in, a challenge that you had where your communication skills shined. Another paragraph might be about your ability to manage projects to deadline. Here's an example of a project that I managed to deadline. Here's how I did it. So you're going to take each of those keywords, write one paragraph for each of those things, and the paragraph will have an example, like almost like a little interview story about when you excelled at that. And then for every job you apply for, you'll take about 15 minutes to look at the job description. You have your starting paragraph and ending paragraph. Think about, you know, the top 2 things that they'll want to hear about and pull those paragraphs in. do a final review, and then you have a customized cover letter that shows some really great examples of specific work that you did that talks, specifically to that role, but you didn't have to write an entirely new letter from scratch. So upfront, your investment of time, probably about an hour and a half to write those paragraphs. But then every application you do, you can actually do it pretty quickly because you have those paragraphs written already. Okay, great question from Zhang. Some applications require submitting a cover letter. Does that mean they definitely will read it? Unfortunately, no, it doesn't. Some places ask for cover letters, definitely submit them in that case. I actually say even when companies don't submit or don't require cover letters, it still is worth it to include it. Like if they say, submit any additional documentation, share a cover letter, because it's just a written explanation, or it can go more in depth about your experience. Some companies, like especially very small companies or small, nonprofits or schools, don't even have an application. They don't even have a place to apply for jobs. You just email your resume. You definitely can use your cover letter as your email in that case. So cover letters are going to be useful if you use this like cover letter process that I just outlined. It makes it much easier to do that. Oh, Nancy, thank you. So Nancy just said the resume and cover letter templates in TC Next under resources are great. And the link that she shared is the Google site where all of that lives. So if you want to go to that site, you can check out our templates and our templates for resumes and cover letters. And I really appreciate that shout out. So, all right, let's go to the next true or false statement. The closer your resume matches keywords in a job description, the more likely you are to get through. True or false? I may have already kind of given you the answer to this. True. Okay. This is a gimme. True. So I said this before. Many of the matching software that's used for job applications is really just looking for keywords, and it's looking for the presence of keywords and the volume of keywords. So like if you say the same thing a number of times, or if the same word comes up a few times. One side note to this that I just want to say, I don't think I have a slide about it, but I've gotten this question before of, okay, well, if keywords are so important, one piece of advice I've seen online is put keywords in white text around the borders of your resume. You don't have to do that. Like, you don't have to do anything crazy with formatting and stuff. Just as long as it's in your resume, you're good. Brianna asks, do keywords apply to cover letters as well? That's a good question. And in my experience, no, they don't. You don't have to worry about keywords as much. You'll probably end up using keywords without trying, just because you're talking about stuff that the employer is looking for. But yeah, you don't have to worry about the keyword matching as much for cover letters. Okay. Next question, and one of my fave topics. Sophisticated companies use AI, artificial intelligence, to score your resume against their openings. So this is, again, talking a little bit about like the software that companies use to target applicants, or to prioritize how they meet with applicants. Is this true or false? True. True. Mm-hmm. Oh man, you guys are up on your recruiting news. I love it. So this is true. Now, again, this is not widespread yet. But companies that, invest in their HR technology or their people platforms are starting to use this artificial intelligence, or these like very advanced statistical tools that can score resumes against job openings. Meaning if you apply for a job and you have, you're a great match, it considers you a great match in some way, you'll be prioritized. So a recruiter looks at your resume, or you'll be prioritized and you'll be sent like some kind of link to do a screening assessment. So that is happening for sure. One thing that I think is really interesting and actually really cool for job candidates is that this software can actually help you in the process, I think, rather than be this like cold tool that's rejecting people. What I mean by that, I think in many, the way that this kind of software is often written about is like, it's just this technology that's saying yes, no to people. But how sophisticated companies are actually using it is they'll take, so for everyone who's applied for jobs, like over the past 3 to 5 years, maybe longer, they save all of those applications. And, they save all those resumes. And this AI that can just scan through everything will actually match people who have ever applied to current job openings. And then in some cases, they'll reach out to people who are not even looking or, haven't even applied to the job to say, hey, you applied to this job that we posted 3 years ago, but you seem like a good match for this job we have now. Would you be interested in interviewing? The reason I share that is because when you're doing when you're job searching right now, knowing that, maybe you'll be called about a job in 3 years is no comfort. You want a job now. But I actually think that this is great advice to think about when you're thinking, where do I want my career to go? What are the companies that I'm interested in? If you're spending time now working on job applications, you should not just be looking at, job listings that are open right now, but think about companies that you want to be at, or, companies that are doing interesting things in your field. Look at the jobs they have open. And sometimes these companies or, schools or organizations will have a post or we'll have some kind of information about, okay, if you don't see a job that interests you, just submit your resume to us. It's worth doing that. It absolutely is worth doing that because 1, they may be looking at you against current openings. And 2, you'll be in this database where, these sophisticated AI tools are actually scanning and seeing when openings happen. I personally had an experience with this that was kind of incredible to me. I applied for a job at a really big tech company like 7 years ago. Never heard anything, or it was just like, thank you for applying. We're not interested. And then a year ago, they reached out and they were like, here are 3 jobs that match your experience. Like, you probably are doing something else, but would you be interested in meeting with us? I interviewed and I ended up getting an offer. It was amazing. And that happens more and more because these companies know that, if people took the time to apply, they probably are interested in opportunities over, the future years. So all that to say, don't just think about, when you're applying for jobs, don't just scan openings, think a little bit more expansively about where you're sending your resume and think about companies that you'd want to work in and submit your materials there if they have, if you can do it, even if they don't have a job posting. The next one, I will get dinged for sharing multiple versions of my resume with the same company, meaning, you're looking at a company or a school and they might have a couple different postings and you're like, oh, all of these look good, but you want to have, you have slightly different experiences. So you submit a couple different times. Will you get dinged? Meaning, will you get rejected because they're like, why do we have different versions of this person's resume? False, 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 true, true, false. Okay. Different votes on this one. False. In general, you won't get rejected because you applied somewhere a few times. An exception to this is like if you apply somewhere, in the triple digits. But if there's a company where you really want to work, or a school or an organization you really want to work at, and you've applied to a couple different jobs there, whether it's, within the same week or within, over a couple of years, it's completely fine. Truth be told, the recruiters probably can see that you've applied multiple times, but they know that people edit their resume for different jobs, and it's totally fine. You don't have to get too stressed out about like this multiple version of your resume dilemma. Okay, next question. Timing matters when applying for jobs. So, in addition to having a stellar, background and resume and all that stuff, when you apply matters. Okay, I'm getting a lot of true, 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 true. Yeah, okay, so this is great. Yeah, so this is in fact true. It definitely matters when you're applying to jobs, when you apply to jobs. Okay, so VJ says, what do you mean time of day? So what I mean by timing, time of day, I actually would say I don't know. I would say it doesn't matter that much. There's advice out there like, oh, never apply to a job on a Friday because no one's going to look at it until Monday. And by then other people have applied. You don't have to worry so much about like time of day or time of week. But what I mean by timing is applying as soon as a job is posted. So, if you're on LinkedIn or if you're on Indeed, you can often see how old a job posting is. The newest job postings are the best ones to apply to, because that's where someone is probably behind the scenes actively looking at who's applying. When you see a job posting that's like 180 days old, it's like, why is this job still open? What is their process? Does anyone in the company care about this job? You do want to get in as soon as possible. The reason that I say that, or the reason, it's applicable to you as an applicant is because, when you think timing matters, you want to apply as soon as you see a job. The challenge is, you wake up in the morning, you look at LinkedIn, you're like, wow, there's a job I want to apply to. Okay, now I have to polish my resume. I have to write my cover letter. Oh, maybe I know someone. I need to reach out to them. Like, you're losing time with all of that. So my advice is, when you're actively looking for a job, the first step really is targeting, knowing what your goal is, like what is your target, and getting all of your application materials ready. Then applying for jobs, because the best process is you wake up in the morning, you see a job on LinkedIn, you're like, wow, this is an amazing match. You have your resume ready. You have your cover letter tool that you can make your new cover letter in about 15 minutes. You submit, you're at the top of the list. That's the best way to get your information, get your information to the employer. Alicia asked a great question. Is there harm in applying to multiple roles for the same organization? Is it worse than just applying to one role? I would say there is not harm in applying to multiple roles. It's completely fine. Lots of people do it. The only time I would say don't do it is if you're applying to like wildly different jobs. If I can't even think of a good example for this, but if there's a school that's advertising a couple different openings in a department, and all the jobs are kind of similar, and you're like, I don't even know what the difference is. You can submit you could submit the same application or a very similar application for those jobs, and it's completely fine. The school is going to know, yeah, there is a lot of similarities, and people can't necessarily tell the difference. So that's completely fine. If they're like wildly different, the only reason I would say don't do it is because it may come across as like, well, what does this person want to do? Do they want to do this thing or like this, very different thing? But if it makes sense based on your background and you have a good case for it, go for it. Zach asks, oh, you're welcome, Alicia. Zach asks, any tips for applying to jobs that you do not want to start until post-graduation? For example, applying to full-time roles now to start in the fall of 2021. Great question. Couple tips here. One is for the vast majority of corporate jobs, they are doing like almost just-in-time hiring, meaning, they post a job and they're expecting the people who are applying to be ready to start pretty much once they get an offer. If they see someone who's in school and not ready to start until fall, in many cases, they'll just say, no, not happening. Like we're not gonna go down this path. That's not true of all corporate jobs for sure. Also especially in education, schools can hire very far in advance. They know what's happening in the next, the upcoming year. In higher education, they have, numbers of students that they're expecting. So you will see some types of organizations or in some industries hiring way in advance. My advice would be know your industry. So understand the timelines for the types of jobs that you're applying for. And number two is make it very clear when you're available to start. So there are jobs, I've seen jobs, not this year necessarily, but like in previous years where a company will say, okay, it's December 2020, we have a sales plan, and we expect to do, international expansion starting in the summer. So we're starting to look for someone for, people for these types of roles to start in the summer. Send us your application. For jobs like that, where they're very clear, like they're doing longer term hiring, just make it really clear when you're available to start. And you could do that by saying, In your resume, your expected graduation date, have your education and then your expected graduation date at the top. You could say in your cover letter, like in the closing, very explicitly, I'm available to start September 2021. So as long as you're clear about it, and as long as you have done a little bit of research on your end to understand what the hiring cycles look like, you should be fine. And I'm also happy to meet one-on-one to talk about your timeline for job applications. Okay, next one. Clean and simple resume formats are easier for robots and humans to read. And by robots, I mean the software that scans your job application. So true or false? True, true, true. Great, true. Yep. I guess I gave this one away a little bit, but true. So when I give advice about, creating a resume, it's true that software may be the thing scanning your resume first, or it might be a human, like a recruiter or the boss, the hiring manager for your role. In any case, clean and simple is the best. Just make it, really easy for someone to understand. When it comes to formatting, make sure that, you have some nice white space. The text isn't teeny tiny, like size 8 font is too small. The other thing that I mean by this is the language that you use in your bullets. I had a great conversation with someone today who was like, oh my gosh, like I wrote my resume bullets and I feel like it's so formal or it's so stuffy. It's like not at all how I talk about my work. And I was like, let's rewrite these to sound, reflective of your true experience, because this resume speak can seem very stuffy. So I would say, look at your resume, read it. Does it make sense? Can you understand what it's saying, like about your own experience? Some of your bullets may sound a little stuffier than others to explain what you've done. But in general, like the more simple, clean language you can use, the better. And then finally, this might be my last one, write your resume for a person, not a system. True or false? True, true, true. Yep. Lots of truths. Exactly. So big reveal, true. Write it for a person, not a system. Even if you are, applying for jobs online, you're applying to a company that uses tons of software and looking at their applications. At the end of the day, a person will probably look at your resume, especially, if you're getting to the interview stage, someone is going to look at your resume and say, okay, does this make sense to me? All right, we have a question. Is it true that employers or recruiters become more stringent given the pandemic and thus less likely to hire international employees who need visa support and may pose uncertainty or instability to a position? I can't say with any sense of data whether this is happening. And in fact, when it comes to pandemic hiring, it's hard for me to say anything definitively. There's a perception that there are fewer jobs listed, but when I look at 2021, employers see high unemployment rates as a great opportunity to go out and get fresh talent. So I can't say with any specifics yes or no to this. I would say if you are an international student applying for roles, some companies are very explicit about, they hire, people internationally, or they're hiring people who are working remotely, or, they're open to hiring people who are working anywhere right now. So I would definitely look for that kind of language. I would also, on your resume, people will often put like additional information, and you can say, are you authorized to work in the US? Do you have are you on an OPT or whatever? I would say be explicit about it, because it will probably come up if you are international and you're applying for US employers. And if you're very clear about it, it's one less thing that they're like, they have a question mark about in their head. So I would just say, be clear about it and expect that it probably will come up as a talking point, but I don't know, what the impact is due to the pandemic. Other questions? Oh, okay. I have some more. Networking will help me land my next job. True or false? True. Yeah, true. Oh, you guys, yes. Well, likely, but it depends. So the reason I answer it this way, with the statement, networking will help me land my next job, pretty likely. I think it's something like 87% of people landed their last job through someone in their network. And that doesn't mean someone they're friends with. It could mean someone they did a cold outreach to, or someone they were introduced to and like exchanged emails with. It depends, it's not guaranteed, but I would say if you are actively job searching or you plan to job search soon, your best friend is networking. Even now in a pandemic, when you're like, I don't see anyone in person ever. Networking is sending emails. It's texting friends to say, hey, do you know people in this industry? It's connecting with your professors or your TAs. It's just reaching out to the people who know you and seeing who they know who could connect you to interesting opportunities. So networking is a fantastic thing to focus on in a job search. And I would argue probably more important than your online job application approach. Okay. A few more questions. Let me see what else I have. Okay. Yeah. I'll answer a few more questions, then we'll get to takeaways. So I got one question privately. I won't say who I got it from, but I'm just going to say it because I think it'll benefit everyone. Any tips on when we get to the interview around behavioral questions and when they ask, why this company? Great question. So for the interview and behavioral questions, what a behavioral question is asking for an example of how you handled a situation previously or how you would handle a situation. So behavioral questions like, what is your behavior in a given situation? The way that I advise approaching these is thinking of previous work stories. So like, what are stories from your past work experience and how can you talk about them in a lot of different ways? If you want to do like one-on-ones, this is a great thing to practice in a one-on-one advising appointment. The second part of the question that I got is, how do you answer why this company? So for a question like that, very likely to come up, almost like a top interview question. For why this company, I would think, what is your honest answer? Like, honestly, why do you want to work for this company besides like, I want to have a job? And that usually will come down to, what is the company trying to accomplish? You're trying to accomplish that thing too. What is the company known for? Probably something you want to learn about and get to know more about yourself. What is this company doing that's interesting to you? And if you can bring up something about, the company's mission or, what the company is in the news for, any of those things make a great way to answer why this company. Any tips for interviewing with a hiring manager virtually? First interview on Friday. Awesome, Allison. Yeah. So congratulations on the interview. I agree. A few people in chat said that. My advice for interviewing with a hiring manager virtually, I would say number one, make sure your like technical setup is great. Like if you can test the link beforehand, maybe at like late at night or on a weekend, awesome, to make sure everything's working. Your headset is working. You can hear. As far as just like how you show up, I would say sit in a room. Ideally, if you could have natural light on you, like right now I'm sitting near a window, it just helps, to see you more clearly. If you can get some quiet, that is very hard to come by if you're in New York and it's getting colder and you live with people. I certainly relate to that. But if you can be somewhere where you can focus and it's quiet, that really is great. And then honestly, I would say, just think about it as in every other sense of the word, a standard job interview. Like if, make the Zoom meeting or make the screen, your entire screen, don't have things happening in the background, turn off like Slack and your cell phone notifications. And if you're in like Zoom where you can see your face and the interviewer's face, set up the screen so that you only see the interviewer. It makes it feel a little bit more natural. So those are my tips for that. Oh man, I'm getting some really good questions. Okay, let me just finish with takeaways and then we'll do questions for the final 5 minutes. Takeaways for online, for job applications. Online job applications should not be your only approach to the job search. Networking, in fact, is probably your best way of getting your next job. Forget gaming the system. Apply as if you're communicating with a person. And then number 3, companies who are serious about hiring treat their applicants well. Poor experiences can be an early red flag. So when I hear from people who are like, oh my God, the interviewer was so cruel, The company took so long to get back to me. All of these different things, you have agency in the job search, and it's okay to say, you know what, this was not a good experience. I don't want to work for you. Just remind yourself of that. It is a pandemic. I think there's a perception that, it's very hard to come by a job right now. I can't say whether that's true or false. I've seen mixed things, but you do still have agency, and it's okay to take a lot of these poor experiences as a reason not to work somewhere. Okay, so that's the end of my slides. We can use the final couple of minutes to answer questions because I have some really good ones. And then here I just have a reminder, you can schedule one-on-one advising time with me. You can also reach out to me through any of these methods. So let me stop sharing my screen, and I'll answer questions that you have and actually look at you guys. Okay, questions that came through. If during the interview they ask, what do you think are your shortcomings? How do you respond? Yeah, challenging question. So this is basically a variation on like, what's your greatest weakness? The way that I recommend answering this is talking about something that, truly is a weakness. You don't want to like fake it. But it's something you're developing or something you're working on or something that isn't, critical to the job. So a great example that I heard yesterday in a mock interview was, someone was applying for HR jobs. They're really interested in people analytics, but they don't necessarily, that wasn't the job that they're going into next. And when they were asked, what is their greatest weakness? They said, honestly, right now, like, this job description list that you want someone who's familiar with statistical tools like R and Python. I've taken a class in it, but I am by no means, comfortable using it in a professional setting. And in fact, like one reason that I want this job is that it'll give me more exposure so that I can move in that direction. And that was just like, great. Because, it's not a reason that they're going to say no to you. And in fact, it shows like your willingness to learn. Other things people have said, let me think. I mean, that's a good example. We can work on other personal examples that you have, but I think that's a good framework for it. Another question, if Kristen was answering. Okay, thank you. I'm reading these out loud. Okay, another question. How do you negotiate salary? What kinds of questions should I ask? Do I initiate a number or a range? That is such a good question. I don't want to deflect it because I think it's so important, but I actually think it's worth an entire workshop. I'm planning on putting together content for that in December. So stay posted. To give a really short, like 30-second answer, I would say do your research. So this can be, going on Glassdoor. It can be LinkedIn has a salary tool now. You can frankly ask people in the field. I know that feels uncomfortable, but you can say, what do you think is a good range for like, a starting position in this job? You're not asking, what do you make? You're just saying, like ballpark, like what's a decent range that someone should be asking for. All those are good ways to get market information. So you have an idea going in. And then when it comes to negotiating salary, there's a whole bunch of strategies, but I would say have a number in mind, be prepared to talk about it and say, I've done my research. This is where this number comes from. And commit to yourself that you're going to you're going to stick to that range. If a company says we really can't pay you that, be prepared to say, no, thank you. That's a key part of negotiation. But again, I will offer more. I'll probably have a workshop on that shortly. Yeah, great question, Akosua, especially if you're starting out. So this sounds like a rich topic. I will have something together for you guys. Okay. Someone else asked, there are laws that govern employees being able to ask for current salaries or employers being able to ask for current salaries. That is completely true. So employers cannot ask, depending on region. So in New York State, in Philadelphia, in I think it's the state of California, employers can't say, what are you currently making? It introduces a lot of bias. Employers can ask what your salary expectations are. So that's not a question of what you're making. It's what do you expect to make? What would you like to make? That is completely fine. And many employers do still ask that. So I would say be prepared for the question to be phrased that way. If you're just starting or starting a career or want to change to another field, how can we make our experience related or relevant? So what you do in these cases, and this is a great topic for one-on-one advising, But I would say think about how your previous experience relates to what you want to do next, whether it's, you know, the industry, the function, like what you were doing day to day, or if you're brand new to the field and you're curious about, you know, something you want to get into it, like what is it about that field that piques your interest? And talk about it in those terms. If you're a student right now at Teachers College, I know some of you are alumni. If you're a student and you're like just entering a field, what are the classes you've taken that are related to that? You can have related coursework on your resume. Let's see. Question about how we access this recording. It will be available on the TC Next portal probably in a few days. Again, it's that link tc.columbia.edu/tcnext. Okay, if during the interview they ask, what questions do you have for us? What would be a good question to ask? That could be anything from, you know, how do you see someone in this role developing? You know, what's the career path for someone who joins in this role? You know, what are trends in the industry that you're seeing? What's the strategic plan for 2021? What are some of the biggest obstacles? Anything, you know, personally about the role development or about the company is great to ask. Oh man, you guys have great questions. Leela asked if have I created a handbook for LinkedIn? Yes, I have. I don't know if it's posted on the TC Next site yet, but it should be shortly. So keep an eye out on that. We can include it in our weekly mailer once it's live. Zhang says the interviewer always asks, let's see, the interviewer always asks you to ask questions at the end of an interview. What kinds of questions can add points? So I would say, like, you know, anything that's relevant to the industry, learning about the job, just showing that you are truly curious about this position and thinking about how you would fit in the role. Okay, it's 1 o'clock. So we are done. Again, feel free to schedule one-on-one advising time. Thank you so much for your attention, your participation. Really enjoy, you know, working with all of you at Teachers College. And happy to meet again. Take care.